Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Vice President Joe Biden had a big week. He did his first face-to-face interview from a distance of about 60 feet, it looked like, at least on camera, with Dana Bash, CNN. And
what'd you say? Huh? I can't hear you.
well, one of the things he said.
100,000 deaths. 100,000 deaths. And at least 35,000 to 50,000 were avoidable. But for lack of attention and ego, I think.
I'll tell you what, you want to play this game, this whole 35 to 50,000 deaths are Trump's fault. This is the same game that Tammy Duckworth and other people tried to play right at the outset before the numbers started to pile up in blue states like New York and New Jersey and Massachusetts, which even though there's a Republican governor in Massachusetts, still the idea is the plurality of deaths and cases exist in two states, New York and New Jersey. The majority of deaths in those three states I mentioned, if you include Massachusetts. You want to talk about nursing home deaths. You want to do the New York, Florida comparison, the Texas, New Jersey comparison, the, pick a state. How about Indiana, Illinois comparison, Iowa, Illinois comparison, Georgia, Illinois comparison? You want to do those comparisons and then say, okay, well, then the deaths that occurred at nursing homes in New York are in Andrew Cuomo, as all the deaths are in New York. New York City on de Blasio, in Illinois on Pritzker and Lightfoot, in New Jersey on Phil Murphy, in Michigan on Gretchen Whitmer. You want to play that game?
Stupid. It's low-hanging fruit, and he should know better.
He retweeted a photo of you wearing it. He's trying to belittle you for wearing a mask, making it seem like it's a sign of weakness. Is it?
He's a fool, an absolute fool to talk that way. I mean, every leading doc in the world is saying we should wear a mask when you're in a crowd.
Well, first of all, you weren't in a crowd. And, of course, we've talked about the science on masks.
Yeah, and Trump wasn't in a crowd either. He was laying a wreath at a memorial, and he was with his wife.
And that leads us to our latest contribution from the poet laureate of Chicago's Morning Answer, R.A. Droit. The DNC at last had worked its will and threw the race for Mr. Dr. Jill. But Biden, even with the pathway cleared, was not a foe that Donald really feared. His handlers had him locked down in a cell to minimize the gaffes that Joe could tell. But minimizing gaffes would come to naught, as Joe by now could scarce complete a thought. When journos asked, had Flynn committed crime, the Biden answer failed to satisfy. I had no role in prosecuting Flynn, and here's the deal, I know that I can win. Trump lied and got us into Vietnam, and on the Germans dropped the atom bomb. Like Harry Tubman said, the buck stops here, and now the working man can't have a beer. I like to stroke young kids just like Barack, who is my best friend, even though he's black. We need his leadership now, and he'll win. That's all I have to say on General Flynn. Yeah. Very nice, R.H. Right? Very, very, very nice. For more on all things Biden and November 3rd related, pleased to be joined by Marc Lauder. He is the Director of Strategic Communications for President Trump's 2020 reelection, former Special Assistant to Vice President and former Special Assistant to the President and Press Secretary to Vice President Pence. Lots of titles. Marc, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
There's so many titles in there, but none of it was poet. I feel like I'm not worthy.
Yeah, exactly. Next time, make them rhyme or some kind of rhyme scheme. Iambic pentameter. Let's try that. So, Marc, Joe Biden says Trump, per this Columbia study the New York Times highlighted this week, Trump is responsible for 35 or 50,000 deaths. If he had had more foresight, exercised more leadership, we could have had a lower body count.
I mean, that's just ludicrous, and it tells you how desperate Joe Biden is if he's trying to claim something like that. Let's remember that this is the same guy who called the president's early action to shut down travel from China as xenophobic and racist when the doctors and the medical experts said it saved lives. And that's really the key here. We could have been upwards of the 2 million deaths as was projected had the president not taken the action in closing the borders and then also taking this economy and shutting it down for public health.
Eric Strauss from ABC News, of all places, reporting, looking at 21 states that eased restrictions as of May 4th or earlier, no major increase in hospitalization, deaths, or percentage of people testing positive. None in all 21 states. And that's the basis for President Trump saying the second wave that people are predicting in the fall and the winter, no matter what it looks like, we're not shutting down. And hopefully we'll never shut down again in response to something like this.
I think it's absolutely right. I mean, I'm walking on the beach in Florida right now because I decided to come down here and enjoy a state that is actually opened up. I'm not wearing a mask, and I'm socially distancing, but people are doing it, and you can see the life coming back. And I know the president is so right when he says America wants to get back to it. And I said this the other day. That, look, this is a country that was founded by people who took a risk and came over to the New World across the ocean. We are the country that tamed the West despite the risks, went to the moon, and actually fought world wars in other people's continents, not because of the risk, but because it was the thing that needed to be done. And this country will find a way to open back up safely. We can do it and have a strong, productive economy. It's what America does.
Yeah, well, the economy, as you know, is hurting right now. 41 million filing unemployment claims. And University of Chicago came out with a study yesterday saying 40% of jobs lost will be permanent. Do you believe that to be true?
No, I actually don't believe that to be true. And I think what we have here are what a lot of economists are doing is they're going back on previous models based on recessions and previous economic times of turmoil. Well, there's one fundamental difference and a flaw to their logic. There was nothing wrong with the economy. We did not slow this economy down because of some fundamental problem with it. It was a pandemic. It was a public health related problem. And so while, yes, there will be job loss, this is not going to be the 40% of these jobs are permanently lost. And I think them using previous models is it's intellectually dishonest.
Well, you have a report out that consumer spending is down 13.5% in April, but incomes were up 10.5% because of government stimulus, and so the impact hasn't been felt in a lot of bank accounts yet. But for those states that continue to lock down in significant ways, it will be felt as the benefits start to run out and the financial the equation that people face fundamentally changes. And it seems to me that there's a need for the president to continue to push on the blue states and even some of the governors who he has a better relationship in blue states like Gavin Newsom than other governors, because you can't have a full recovery and a quick one if you don't have California, Illinois, New York, New Jersey, Michigan online.
Well, and it's true, and we need these states to reopen and to do it smartly. I have to question whether they're playing politics with it, trying to keep their economies closed to inflict what they would hope to be political pain on the president in November. I think that's what you're seeing in a lot of these states because, as you have said, we have seen states reopen and do it safely without a second wave. And so there's no reason why folks who are able to get out there and work should be able to do so. And folks who find themselves in the high-risk categories, whether because of pre-existing conditions or if they're older, then they should be able to stay inside. We can do both.
Well, and to your point, a former Obama economic advisor now at Harvard, Jason Furman, at a briefing, a bipartisan briefing that was memorialized in Politico this week, suggested he expects third quarter numbers like we've never seen in American history. I mean, in terms of growth numbers, even if the second quarter is expected to be not particularly pretty. And this, the response from Democrats, at least as, again, reported by Politico, was great concern at what Jason Furman was saying about what the third quarter was going to look like. Why would you be concerned about good economic numbers in the third quarter if it wasn't politics?
No, you're absolutely right. And we have to remember, it wasn't, go back last summer when you had major Democrats saying they hoped for a recession. They needed a recession so Americans could lose their jobs, lose their homes, lose their savings, but that might help them politically. I mean, that's what Democrats were saying last summer, and now you see them trying to encourage that kind of action this year, and it's really sad, and we've got to get beyond it. And I think what we're going to see Isn't America getting back to work? You're going to see that growth. And I think the president's going to be reelected because people are going to like that strong leadership.
And one thing, as a parent, and I have the same age kids that President Trump has, Barron, we need our kids to go back to school. This e-learning thing is really not working. They need socialization. They need their lives back. And they're at the group that is at lowest risk for getting coronavirus.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, we don't shut our schools down when chickenpox goes through, and it goes through every school. We don't shut our schools down for the flu every year or for pink eye. And all of these are highly contagious. We learn to mitigate. We learn to manage. And in this population, especially with young kids, they are the least vulnerable to it.
I wanted to get your reaction to this since Trump taking on big tech is a headline today. This report in Recode where 4 billionaires in particular have been identified: LinkedIn founder Reid Hoffman, Facebook co-founder Dustin Moskovitz, Steve Jobs' widow, and former Google CEO Eric Schmidt, all putting together the digital strategy, if you will, to improve the digital infrastructure that the Democrat Party has in order to defeat Trump in November. This is goes back to hearings last year where Dennis Prager, our colleague, was there, and Dr. Robert Epstein was there talking about how Google can manipulate the information flow and potentially influence voters' attitudes and move votes. So the combination of, it's not just billionaires, but it's billionaires in the big tech space that have the ability to manipulate information to hundreds of millions of Americans. This has to be a real concern for the reelection campaign.
Well, it's absolutely a concern, although one advantage we have is that we are technologically light years ahead of Democrats and their campaigns. They can't even come close to competing with us, which is another reason why I think they're panicking, not only in terms of their censorship with Twitter and others in big tech, but also trying to just rapidly close the gap, because they saw the gap. They didn't know the gap was there in 2016, and it's become even worse for them as it goes into 2020. I'll tell you, with the Trump campaign, we put on live events every night at around 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central. Each one of those programs is getting over 1 million viewers. Some of them have gotten over 2.5 million viewers, which actually means that we have more viewers than any program on CNN all day, and over almost every program than MSNBC.
Well, you should raise the bar. I mean, that's not bad. But here's so you're not. I mean, you're not worried about Facebook and Google being more transparently aggressive the way Twitter has been recently, and really trying to shut down Trump's communication channels, or at least their communication channels to the Trump campaign.
Well, I'll give the Facebook founder some credit, because yesterday he said that the social media platform should not be in the business of censoring political messages. Twitter obviously has taken another step, and that's something they're going to have to live with. And the one thing I would remind the Facebook and the social media tech companies is that you rely on wireless and cellular wireless frequencies to get your message and your product into people's phones and onto their laptops. And the federal government regulates that, just like they do for radio stations and television stations. And there's no reason, and it's perfectly legal. I'm not a lawyer, but it's perfectly legal for them to take a look at their use of the spectrum as well.
Interesting. All right. He is Marc Lauder. He is the Director of Strategic Communication for President Trump's 2020 reelection campaign. Marc, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.